Ladies and gentlemen, we've all encountered people who thrive on control, manipulation, and the slow erosion of our self-worth. These people are not always strangers. They can be partners, friends, colleagues, or even family. What makes them dangerous isn't just their charm or their ability to wear masks. It's the way they twist our reality until we question our own sanity. But here's the truth: every mask eventually slips. And sometimes all it takes to expose a narcissist is not a long battle, not shouting matches, not even years of waiting, just one powerful question. A question so simple, yet so disarming, that it pulls the curtain back and reveals what they've been hiding all along. Today, let's explore how to expose a narcissist with one question and the 6 truths that give this question its power. So often, when we recognize that someone has crossed our boundaries, our first instinct is to react. We want to say, "You're wrong. You hurt me. You lied." That's natural because our emotions are raw, and calling out bad behavior feels like taking back control. But with a narcissist, this instinct becomes a trap. They are experts at twisting accusations into a stage for their performance. If you tell them they're being dishonest, they'll cry and make themselves the victim. If you point out their manipulation, they'll laugh and call you too sensitive. Suddenly, the focus is no longer on their behavior. It's on your reaction. That's why accusations fail. The more we accuse, the more they spin the story to protect their ego and disarm us. What makes asking a question so powerful is that it flips the script. Instead of coming in like a prosecutor presenting evidence, you come in like a curious observer. You don't give them an opening to call you dramatic or angry. You simply place the spotlight back on them and ask them to explain themselves. A narcissist thrives on pushing you into chaos because chaos blurs the truth. But when you hold steady and ask, "Why did you think that was the right thing to do?" you pierce through the fog. You refuse to play their game of smoke and mirrors. Now, it's no longer about you being defensive. It's about them having to confront their own choices. This is the heart of power dynamics. In every conversation, someone holds the center of control. Narcissists work relentlessly to occupy that center. They pull you into defending yourself, justifying your feelings, or calming them down after they've hurt you. But when you replace accusation with a question, you shift that center. Instead of giving them a stage, you hand them a mirror. And mirrors are dangerous for narcissists because they reveal what they spend their entire lives trying to hide: their lack of accountability. When you ask instead of accuse, you stop feeding the narrative that you're the problem, and you begin exposing the truth. They cannot stand to be questioned. Think about it. Accusations are often black and white. You lied. You were cruel. You don't care. They give the narcissist an easy path to denial. "No, I didn't. That's not what happened. You're imagining things." And just like that, they've turned the conversation into a debate about your accuracy, your memory, your sanity. But a question isn't as easy to dismiss. A question lingers. It sits in the air, unanswered, demanding something more than deflection. Even if they avoid answering, their avoidance becomes an answer in itself. Silence, defensiveness, or sarcasm, all of it reveals the truth. They cannot justify their behavior without exposing themselves. There's also something profoundly empowering for you in this shift. Asking instead of accusing keeps you calm. It keeps you from spiraling into the emotional storm that narcissists want to drag you into. You remain grounded not because you're ignoring their behavior, but because you're refusing to let it control your emotional state. When you ask, Why do you think that's okay? You're not begging for validation or exploding in rage. You're drawing a boundary with clarity. You're saying, I see what you're doing, and I'm not afraid to question it. That stance is powerful, not just because it exposes them, but because it reminds you of your own strength. And here's the deeper truth. Asking instead of accusing protects your integrity. You don't have to fight dirty or shout to defend yourself. You don't have to match their manipulation with counterattacks. Instead, you rise above it by staying aligned with your values, honesty, calmness, and clarity. A narcissist might win the battle of accusations because they're willing to lie, to twist, to gaslight. But when you ask, you're not battling, you're revealing, you're showing not only to them, but to anyone who might be watching that you will not be silenced or controlled. You will not surrender your voice. That's what makes a simple question so revolutionary. It strips away their power without stripping away your dignity. The truth about narcissists is that they are performers. Every conversation is a stage, every relationship is an audience, and every interaction is a chance to maintain their carefully crafted mask. They wear the mask of confidence, the mask of kindness, the mask of victimhood, whatever it takes to get what they want from others. But masks are fragile. They rely on silence, compliance, and unquestioned acceptance. When you introduce one piercing question, why do you think that's okay? You don't just speak words. You pull back the curtain on the performance. You disrupt the script they've rehearsed 1,000 times, and suddenly the act falters. That moment of hesitation, that flicker of defensiveness, is where the mask cracks. What makes this question so powerful is its simplicity. You're not shouting. You're not accusing. You're not even labeling their behavior. Instead, you are calmly placing responsibility back on them. In that moment, they are forced to confront something they usually avoid at all costs: accountability. For someone who thrives on control, this feels like being cornered. They cannot use charm to gloss over it, and they cannot easily gaslight you out of it, because the question itself demands a direct justification. You are asking them to step outside of their performance and explain themselves. That's where the mask begins to crumble, because narcissists are not skilled at truth. They are skilled at manipulation. Here's the secret: narcissists rely on reactions. They count on you to explode in anger so they can call you crazy. They count on you to cry so they can call you weak. They count on you to withdraw so they can call you calm. But a calm, steady question denies them all of that. Instead of giving them a reaction they can twist, you give them silence wrapped in inquiry. And silence terrifies them because silence paired with truth exposes what they work so hard to conceal. It is like shining a flashlight into a room where they've hidden all the mess. They can no longer control where the light lands. That's why this question is not just a sentence, it is a spotlight. Now, you may notice something fascinating when you ask this question. Some narcissists will laugh it off with sarcasm, hoping humor will distract you. Others will grow angry. Their voice is sharp because rage is their shield against exposure. Some will even turn the question back on you, saying things like, well, why do you think what you did was okay? This is their last defense, a desperate attempt to flip the mirror away. But here's the beauty of it. No matter how they respond, the mask is already slipping. Their inability to answer directly, their need to evade, their discomfort, it all reveals the truth. For the first time, the performance isn't working. And it's not just about exposing them to you. This question has ripple effects. in the environment around you. If others are present, coworkers, family, friends, they begin to see what you see. Narcissists often maintain their power by convincing others they are charming, caring, or misunderstood. But when you calmly ask, "Why do you think that's okay?" and they cannot respond with clarity, those watching start to notice the cracks too. The mask doesn't just slip in private, it slips in public. Suddenly, the narrative they've spun for everyone else starts to unravel. That's why this question is both personal protection and collective truth. It doesn't just free you, it reveals reality to others. But perhaps the most profound impact of this question is not even on them, it's on you. When you ask it, you are reclaiming your voice. For too long, narcissists train us to stay silent, to doubt ourselves, to believe that questioning them is dangerous. Every time we swallow our truth, we strengthen their mask. But the moment you ask, "Why do you think that's okay?" you are telling yourself, "My voice matters. My boundaries matter. My perception of reality is valid." That declaration, even more than the narcissist's reaction, is where the true power lies. Because exposing them isn't only about unmasking who they are. It's about remembering who you are. A narcissist cannot answer honestly because honesty requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is something they fear more than anything else. To admit truth would mean admitting flaws, mistakes, and selfish intentions that would shatter the image they've worked so hard to maintain. The image of being right, superior, or untouchable. When you ask them directly, "Why do you think that's okay?" you corner them into a space where honesty would reveal their entitlement. For example, if they admitted, "I did it because I only care about myself," the mask would completely fall away. And since their entire identity is built on preserving that mask, they dodge, deflect, or lie instead. This inability to be truthful isn't just a habit, it's a survival mechanism. The narcissist's world is built like a fragile glass tower. Every dishonest excuse, every twisted story, every half-truth adds another shaky level to that tower. If they were to answer honestly, even once, that tower would begin to crack. Honesty demands consistency, and consistency is impossible when your life is built on manipulation. That's why when confronted with this question, you'll often see them pause or grow visibly uncomfortable. You've just asked them to step out of their tower of lies and onto solid ground, a place they don't know how to stand. And so they cling to their defenses instead of offering a real answer. This is also why narcissists frequently resort to diversion when asked to justify themselves. Instead of saying why they thought their behavior was okay, they might bring up something you did weeks ago, something irrelevant, or even something you never did at all. They cannot provide a direct, honest explanation because their behavior was never rooted in fairness or empathy. It was rooted in control, in dominance, in the hunger for validation. And to admit that would not only expose them to you, but also to themselves, a truth they've been running from for years. So rather than looking in the mirror, they turn it back on you. This isn't just dishonesty, it's self-preservation. Another reason they cannot answer honestly is because honesty requires accountability. To say, "You're right, I crossed a line," or "I shouldn't have treated you that way," is to take responsibility. Responsibility strips away the control they wield so skillfully. When a narcissist loses control of the narrative, they feel exposed, weak, and powerless. And nothing terrifies them more than powerlessness. So they dance around the question, hoping you'll grow frustrated, lose your calm, or back down. The irony, of course, is that their very inability to answer becomes the answer itself. It shows you that their behavior has no real justification. It's simply manipulation dressed up as normalcy. And here's something important. When you ask this question and they fail to answer honestly, it doesn't just reveal who they are to you. It reveals who they are to everyone around them. If others are present, their inability to give a clear, reasonable explanation becomes glaring. People begin to notice the avoidance, the defensiveness, the hostility. They see the cracks that the narcissist worked so hard to cover. That's why narcissists fear questions more than accusations. Accusations they can fight, twist, or deny. Questions, however, shine a light that exposes them in ways even they can't control. The silence between their words is often louder than anything they could say. But perhaps the deepest reason they cannot answer honestly is because honesty would strip away the illusion they live in. Narcissists do not just lie to you, they lie to themselves. They create entire narratives where they are the hero, the victim, or the genius misunderstood by the world. Honesty would force them to acknowledge their selfishness, their cruelty, their manipulation. And to a narcissist, that acknowledgement feels like death. So they avoid it at all costs, even if it means betraying relationships, destroying trust, or isolating themselves. That's why this single question, why do you think that's okay, is so powerful. It demands something they cannot give. And in that gap, in that refusal, their true character is revealed. One of the most exhausting parts of dealing with a narcissist is how easily they pull you into their storm. They thrive on chaos, conflict, and confusion. The more you lose your balance, the more they feel in control. But here's the shift when you stand your ground and refuse to get swept away. You strip them of their favorite weapon. That's the power of asking a question instead of accusing. It keeps you anchored even as they scramble to regain control. Instead of being dragged into the emotional theater they're staging, you remain steady, calm, and collected. This calmness isn't weakness. It's the very thing that unsettles them most. A narcissist expects you to react. They want your anger, your tears, your defensiveness. Why? Because those reactions give them ammunition. If you shout, they can say you're crazy. If you cry, they can call you overly sensitive. If you defend yourself endlessly, they can spin the story until you look like the problem. But when you protect your ground and simply hold space with a firm, steady question, why do you think that's okay? You deny them that fuel. You starve their need for drama. And when they don't get the emotional payoff they're seeking, they grow frustrated, uneasy, even panicked. That's when the scrambling begins. Protecting your ground is also about protecting your peace. Too often, people give away their energy in battles with narcissists only to walk away drained and doubting themselves. But when you ground yourself in calm curiosity instead of reactive accusation, you preserve your energy. You remain in control of your emotions, even while they're losing control of theirs. That's the irony. The very question meant to expose them also protects you. It creates a buffer between their manipulation and your sense of self. It says you can spin, you can twist, you can rage, but I will not be moved. You'll notice something important in these moments. When you stand your ground, their tactics become more obvious. Their voice might rise, their excuses become clumsy, or their attempts to redirect the blame feel forced. That's because they're scrambling. They're used to you folding, apologizing, or retreating. But now you're not playing the same game. You're not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you unravel. And in their scramble, the truth of who they are begins to shine through. What they once hid with charm or manipulation now looks desperate, even transparent. By staying grounded, you let them reveal themselves without lifting a finger. This approach doesn't just change the interaction, it changes the power dynamic. Instead of being someone they can control, you become someone they can't shake. That's unsettling for a narcissist because their sense of superiority depends on your compliance. When you refuse to give it, when you calmly hold your ground, you reclaim your power in the relationship. You show them and yourself that you are no longer under their spell, that you will not trade your peace for their chaos, that you have the right to stand firmly in truth without being dragged into their performance. And here's the deeper truth. Protecting your ground isn't about winning against them. It's about winning back yourself. It's about proving to yourself that you don't need to match their rage with rage or their cruelty with cruelty. You can stay rooted in dignity, clarity, and strength. Every time you hold your ground instead of collapsing into their game, you build self-respect. You send yourself the message, I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of boundaries. I do not have to lose myself to survive this. That's the gift of protecting your ground. You stop being a participant in their storm and instead become the calm that exposes their chaos. When you ask a narcissist the question, why do you think that's okay? The effect doesn't stop with them. It ripples through the entire environment you're in, whether that's a workplace, a family gathering, or a circle of friends. Narcissists survive by crafting narratives that make them look admirable or misunderstood, while painting you as irrational, sensitive, or even unstable. That fast aid works best when no one challenges it. But the moment you calmly put that question on the table, the air shifts. Everyone present can feel the disruption because the performance no longer runs smoothly. The narcissist, once in control of the room, suddenly stumbles, and the cracks in their mask are no longer just visible to you, they become visible to everyone. People often underestimate how powerful group perception is in these dynamics. A narcissist thrives on convincing others that they are the reasonable one, the caring one, the clever one. They do this through subtle digs, carefully chosen words, or false humility. But when you interrupt the script with a direct question, you reveal the manipulation without even naming it. Those who are watching notice the hesitation, the deflection, or the defensiveness. They see the narcissist scrambling for an explanation they cannot genuinely provide. Even if no one speaks it aloud, that moment plants a seed of doubt in the audience. The once charming figure doesn't look so confident anymore. This is especially important in family systems. In many families with a narcissistic parent, sibling, or relative, the entire group unconsciously bends around the narcissist's behavior. People avoid conflict, excuse cruelty, or pretend not to notice manipulation just to keep the peace. But peace built on silence is never real peace. It's control. When you ask that one question in front of others, you disrupt that unspoken agreement. You invite the room to acknowledge the truth. And even if some resist it at first, the tension becomes undeniable. They can no longer pretend not to see what's happening because you've shone a light on it. The same is true in professional spaces. Narcissistic colleagues or leaders often climb high because of their ability to perform confidence and deflect accountability. Teams may tolerate their behavior because they're afraid of confrontation or losing favor. But the moment you calmly ask them to justify themselves, others see what you've always known. Their leadership is a mask, their confidence a cover. The silence that follows their inability to answer is louder than any accusation could ever be. You don't just expose them to yourself, you expose them to the system they've been manipulating. And that changes the dynamics of the whole room. What's fascinating is how the narcissist reacts to this shift in the environment. They may double down, trying harder to charm others, or they may lash out, attempting to intimidate. But neither works as well as it once did because the illusion has already cracked. Once people glimpse the gap between their words and reality, it's hard to unsee. The narcissist feels this loss of control and often grows more desperate. But here's the empowering part. The more they scramble, the more the truth reveals itself. You don't have to convince anyone of what you've been experiencing. The narcissist does it for you by unraveling in front of them. And perhaps the most liberating part of changing the room is this: it reminds you that you are not alone. Narcissists work tirelessly to isolate their targets, to make them feel like no one else sees or believes them. But when you ask that question and the room shifts, you witness something powerful. Others begin to see what you've been carrying alone. Even if no one speaks up immediately, the silence, the glances, the tension prove that the truth is no longer hidden. That's how collective awakening begins, with one brave voice asking one simple question. And from there, the room will never be quite the same again. When you ask a narcissist the question, "Why do you think that's okay?" you are stepping directly into the territory of courage. And courage is never comfortable. Narcissists condition people around them to stay silent, to keep the peace, to avoid rocking the boat. They thrive in environments where no one dares to challenge them because silence protects their illusion of power. So when you choose to break that silence, you're doing something profoundly uncomfortable. You're breaking a pattern that may have existed for years. But courage doesn't wait for comfort. Courage shows up in discomfort, and that's what makes it powerful. Comfort would mean swallowing your words again, pretending their behavior doesn't bother you, or telling yourself it's not worth the fight. And in the short term, that feels easier. After all, why invite conflict when you can avoid it? But comfort always has a cost. Every time you stay silent to avoid conflict, you lose a little more of your peace, a little more of your dignity, a little more of yourself. Choosing courage over comfort is about deciding that your self-worth is worth more than temporary ease. It's about declaring that your voice matters, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Courage in these moments is not about shouting or attacking. It's about standing firm in truth. It's asking the question calmly, without apology, and being willing to sit in the tension that follows. Narcissists rely on that tension to scare you back into silence. They may roll their eyes, laugh, raise their voice, or try to intimidate you. But courage means you stay rooted, even in that discomfort. You remind yourself that you don't need their approval, and you don't need them to like your question. You only need to stand by your values, your boundaries, and your right to clarity. That's what courage looks like in real life. Not grand gestures, but steady resolve in moments when it would be easier to fold. And here's something important: courage is contagious. When you dare to ask the uncomfortable question, you give permission to others around you to do the same. In families, in workplaces, in friendships, your courage plants seeds. People who have been silent, who have watched the narcissist, its behavior in quiet pain, suddenly see another way. They see that it's possible to challenge without losing yourself, to speak up without falling apart. They see that comfort is not the only option, that there is another path, a braver path. And even if they don't take it right away, your courage shifts the atmosphere. It reminds everyone that silence is not the only response. Of course, courage comes with risk. Narcissists do not like being exposed, and they may react with anger, blame, or retaliation. But this is where courage matters most. Courage says, even if they react badly, I will not betray myself. It's a reminder that their reaction is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your integrity, to your peace, to your boundaries. Choosing courage over comfort means accepting that peace built on truth is worth far more than peace built on lies. It means understanding that sometimes the storm is necessary because storms clear the air. In the end, courage over comfort is not about changing the narcissist. It's about changing you. It's about stepping out of the role they've assigned you. The quiet one, the compliant one, the forgiver, and stepping into your true role, a person with dignity, worth, and voice. When you ask, why do you think that's okay? You're not just exposing them. You're declaring that you will no longer betray yourself for the sake of false peace. You're choosing courage, and in doing so, you're choosing freedom. And while it may not feel comfortable in the moment, it is the kind of choice that reshapes your life. Here's the truth. You don't expose a narcissist by yelling louder, proving harder, or begging longer. You expose them by standing calm in your power and asking the one question they cannot answer with honesty. Why do you think that's okay? That question doesn't just shine a light on their behavior. It shines a light on your courage. It proves that you are no longer willing to be silenced, no longer willing to trade your peace for their comfort, and no longer willing to carry the weight of their excuses. When you ask this question, you are not trying to change them. You are choosing to change you. You are choosing to live in truth instead of illusion. You are choosing boundaries over manipulation. You are choosing dignity over control. And even though it may feel uncomfortable, even though it may stir conflict, what it really does is set you free. Because at the end of the day, exposing a narcissist isn't about destroying their mask, it's about removing yours. The mask of silence, the mask of pretending everything is fine, the mask of carrying pain in the dark. When you ask that one question, you take off the mask you've been forced to wear, and you show the world that your voice, your truth, and your worth will no longer be hidden. So hold that question close. Let it remind you that you are not powerless, no matter how many times someone tried to make you feel small. You have the right to question what hurts you. You have the right to stand in your truth. And you have the right to protect your peace, even if it makes others uncomfortable, because courage isn't about comfort, it's about freedom. And freedom always begins with one brave question.